you have millions of choices to make, and those choices are made every single day. I mean, it's just a constant decision of, which path we're going, what angle we're taking, and, you need to ask yourself, am I moving in the direction of a life filled with self-pity, guilt, hopelessness, despair, all leading to that life of regret that you just mentioned? Or am I making choices that will lead me to true joy, honor, contentment, and peace of mind, resulting in serenity? So, as you age and you get toward that final chapter, up in your years, and as that approaches, the thing that I want to end this with is I'm going to tell you nobody is coming to the rescue. So take accountability and make all those choices wisely, starting today.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to Run with the Cheetahs, the podcast. This podcast is the companion podcast to the book Run with the Cheetahs, written by Mr. Jerry Freishtat. It is a fabulous book. And the companion podcast came along after Jerry did the audiobook. And as good as the book is, and as good as the audiobook is, he really felt like there was a lot more that needed to be said about all of these topics that he covers in the book. So he invited me graciously to join him for the podcast, and we've been having a great time with these conversations. We really appreciate your listening, your watching, and we really appreciate all the comments you've sent in. They've been fantastic. We love it so much, and we just hope that we're bringing you the material that you're excited to hear. We do about 2 of these a month. All right, so today's topic is going to be, I think Jerry saved the best to last in his book, actually. I think he saved the best to last. The topic is serenity. Let me get him in here. Jerry, come on in and say hello.
Hey, Russell. Hey, great day. Good to be here again, and just absolutely looking forward to this. Today's kind of a special day in reference to this topic of serenity. I had the unfortunate experience. My father passed away about a month ago, and in the book, which we're going to get into and cover a lot about serenity and everything else, a lot of the influence of the chapter was from my father. And there's no person that I know of that ended their life in complete serenity like he did. And, they had a 72-year marriage between kids, grandchildren, great-grandchildren, great-great-grandchildren. They put 68 quality human beings on this earth,
Wow.
of which obviously that's going to turn into thousands and generations to come. And, he built relationships that were, lifelong relationships, impeccable friends. And he also, they came from nothing, paycheck to paycheck, and they built a financial empire. And the influence on all of us, I say all of us, myself and my 2 brothers, and I'd say all the first level grandchildren as well. The impact was immeasurable, and we're going to get into it. Yep.
Jerry, first off, my condolences on the passing of your father. I knew your father a little bit, just a touch, but just a touch to know that everything you just said is absolutely spot on. I felt good around your father. He just had a way of making you feel comfortable, good, and talking to him was so easy. I probably met him 4 or 5 times, but each time it was really nice. He was a great man. Jerry, how old was he again?
94 years old.
Wow. He was a great man, lived a great life. Wow.
Absolutely.
We should all be so lucky, my man.
Yep.
Well, all right, Jerry, as I said, I think in your book, and I love that book, and everybody should have a copy of that on their bookshelf. You saved the best for last. You say in that chapter, I think it's chapter 19 on Serenity. You say, we've talked a lot about goals and achievement and success and money and all that, but serenity may well be the ultimate destination for it. I think that's pretty powerful. Tell us, Jerry, what in the world is serenity?
Well, it's very difficult to come up with a specific definition of serenity because it's a culmination of life's experiences. And I think the best way to convey this is I'm just going to read 2 paragraphs out of the chapter.
Sure.
And I think people will get a real good understanding of what it's all about. So you will realize that time is your most precious commodity, and learn that all of the most valuable things in life cannot be bought. This is when serenity becomes part of your existence. You begin yearning for the intangible, reflecting on the most precious things that you've experienced in life, like graduation day, your wedding day, your first child being born, building a snowman with your grandchild, the dogs you owned, the person you saved, or the people that you launched to a better life. You will start to value your relationships more and see the goodness in people differently. Drama will dissipate as you learn it's simply not worth your time or energy. Haters will have no impact on you. You will take pride in the success of the children you raised and the quality of the humans you put on this earth. Your love for your life partner will continue to grow as the 2 of you reflect on the world and the family you built together. You will look at each other like the day you met for eternity, reflect on the empire you built together, and each of you will know you were the lucky one. Grandchildren will be the joy of your life. The best description I've ever heard when you reach this place called serenity is silent harmony. It's an inside job. And I think that'll give people an idea of the culmination, the accumulation, and the trajectory that I would say just about every one of us is looking to land in our elderly years.
Jerry, so many good words and all, so many good words. It's an inside job, silent harmony. I've never heard that phrase before until you.
Yep.
Great words. I want to stop for a moment. I just want to pause for just a second here and say to everyone who might be listening, because, we might have some 20-year-olds, some 30s, some 40s, and they're thinking, well, this guy's talking about the day when I'm sitting in my rocking chair, and he's talking about looking back on my life. And you know what? Here's the key thing that you need to know right now as younger people. This serenity picture that Jerry just described is built 30 and 40 years before that. It's That's built right. Today. You don't wait till you're 80 to start looking around for serenity. You build it now. We'll get to that a little bit further. We're going to talk about time horizons in a little bit. But Jerry, let me ask you this. Here's something. So many people kind of confuse serenity with achievement. And, how do those 2 things work together?
Well, achievement is, I would describe it as it's a prerequisite to serenity. I mean, humans are built to achieve. And, in life, this is also in the book, our struggles determine our strengths, and our strengths lift us to glory. With no glory, you eventually are going to end up in a place of regret. So the answer is achievement's a component, and it's kind of what serenity has a lot of what I call residue, things that are under it that slowly lead to that inner sense of contentment and peace of mind. So, achievement is definitely one of the core factors. I mean, I put it up there with one of the top components if you want to have a life of serenity as you age.
Was there a specific experience? I know you mentioned your dad a little bit ago, and I know he was like such a good example for you. Was there any other life experiences that really kind of helped taught you about serenity?
Well, it's the concept really came from Again, this is another chapter in the book called The Great Observer. For whatever reason, when I was younger, I always was a good observer of people, of places, what was going on. And, and obviously part of that was, watching, my grandparents, watching the relationships, at family functions of the older generation and so forth. And so a lot of it has to do with where and what you came from, which in turn, determines, what you're made of. Most of us listening to this today we live in a world of abundance. My family faced daily struggles, fought battles to better themselves throughout their lifetime. And, seeing the joy in my family and everyone, despite the struggles, had a lasting impact on me. Family was very important, and people were happy. They were, in spite of the struggles and in spite of the lack of funds and paycheck to paycheck family for a couple of generations. The focus was always on the intangibles, and money can't measure that. So seeing that over time, enabled me to kind of envision, where I wanted to land 30, 40, 50 years from now.
Jerry, you just said happiness in spite of the struggle. I think we're going to have to do a whole segment on that.
Right.
No, because I mean, that's key. I mean, that's key.
Yeah.
My goodness. Yeah. Well, why do you think it is that so many successful people, and you read about this all the time, people who, are the titans of industry or whatever you want to say, and they're miserable, Well, why is it? Why is it that successful people struggle with serenity?
Well, it's not all successful people, but life is a series of obsessions, and you have to be able to make the leap from one obsession to the next to the next. All extremely successful people are obsessed with something for certain periods of time, but if you stay obsessed with one thing for your entire life, you will not reach serenity. It's what you call the seasons of your life. Mm-hmm. It evolves and changes over time. I think that in today's world, there's definitely a more of I want it now. I mean, it's human nature. I mean, that's the way all of us were. But I mean, I think it's more evident today. So the lack of vision, courage, and the faith. The serenity concept has a lot to do with faith and belief that you're going to put in 30, 40 years to build something, and it's going to result in a internal feeling that can't be matched any other way. I think the people who struggle the most, are the sheep in the book, okay, because the sheep are risk averse people who think they have life all planned out. Like we talked about in the other podcast, the plan A people,
right.
And life doesn't work that way. Life is supposed to be an adventure. It's part of the human spirit. Your ability to step into the unknown will directly correlate to the serenity you develop later in your life. Going back to another quote that I love from one of the very first self-learning programs I went to, I was in my mid-20s, was that the Dennis Waitley quote. He who seeks risk creates security. He who seeks security risks everything.
Wow.
And essentially what that means is if you're not putting yourself out there, making those quantum leaps, trying new things, growing, expanding, developing yourself, you're going to end up in a place where you have regrets because you didn't do those things. So I think that, having the faith and your ability to articulate your dream life 30 years from now is one of the most common components to those who reach serenity. They have a vision, and very few people, that's why people don't invest, by the way. They can't see 10, 20, 30, 40 years down the road. And the people who are the most successful have the ability to do that.
Wow. Well, personally, how about what are some of the practices and habits that you have utilized to cultivate serenity in your own life? How do you consciously work at that to cultivate that feeling you want to have many years from now, a couple decades from now?
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know where this came from, but it must have been from a lot of the self learning and things I was exposed to in my 20s. But I've always had a deep seated belief that if I do enough of the right things, enough of the time, over a long duration of time, great results happen. Okay. Doesn't mean it's happening next week, next month. It might not even be next year or two. Okay. But if I just keep at it ethically, morally, doing the things that, are your set of inviolate principles and ethics, it's what I call in my book, your inner moral core. If you stick with that, it can launch you to places that you just couldn't imagine. It's, I think a lot of the serenity thing comes from the ability to do what's right in the face of adversity. And I know I've mentioned this quote before, again, the Booker T. Washington quote, a lie doesn't become truth, wrong doesn't become right, and evil doesn't become good just because it's accepted by a majority. I mean, your ability to have the tough conversations, your ability to stand up for your core beliefs and what you know is right, again, are those things that launch you to a different level than most people.
You say you heard that back in your 20s.
Yeah.
You're telling me that something you heard back in your 20s resonated enough with you, strong enough that you are still living with that today.
Not only living with it, it's proven itself out. It has absolutely 100% proven itself out. I mean, and I think that for all of us, again, if we go look at the people that we consider having the most success, well-rounded, developed life, and in the world that I call serenity, they have those. They all did it the same way. They all you get there the same way. I mean, it could be different categories, could be different things. It doesn't necessarily mean you're a multimillionaire because the effort, a worthy cause, I guess is the best way of putting it. Spending your life on worthy causes, and always coming back to your principles, coming back to your morals and your ethics, and sticking by it in the toughest times, in the face of adversity, even if it means you stand alone, is one of the critical junctions that I see in people that put them on a different level of internal, self contentment.
Jerry, that's so good. I mean, that is just such good stuff. This would be a great time because when you talk about a worthy cause, this would be a great time to talk about what you call in your chapter the 5 horizons. The 5 horizons. And you identify that because each one of these horizons are an area where our listeners, no matter what their age, and because again, I sometimes worry that talk about serenity really sounds like we're talking to people in their rocking chairs, and that's not the case. I want to make sure people know that what they're doing today in their lives will pay compound interest. There's one of your financial terms for you, Jerry. Compound interest. What they're doing today towards a worthy cause will pay compound interest going forward to those days, later days. And here are your 5 horizons. And these are good. And if you have a comment about any or each of these, it'd be great. The 5 are health, family, finances, profession, and faith. And again, those are 5 areas, and I've seen it done with 7 and 4, and everyone's got their own way of how to dice up life, but those are your 5 horizons. I'd love to hear a little bit about what you say about that.
Well, I think that, again, it almost comes from my common sense perspective. Just I approach everything and, again, from a place of how humans are built and human nature. And all of those categories, require, a certain discipline, a resilience, a dedication, things that can produce, in a weird way, failures, right? And then from those failures in all those categories, you rebound, and like I always say, the comeback's always greater than the setback, and you build each one of those categories over time. And what I find with most people is that, I guess is a good point to make right now, is that we talk about all the time about it's what you do now, it's the action now, it's execute now, it's 10-year goal is ridiculous, right? I mean, and it gets back to that thing where I talk about goals versus dreams. Goals are what you need to do to execute action, short-term actions. And I like short-term goals. I mean, I like hourly goals, daily goals, weekly, but I mean, and when you get out in the months and years, I call those dreams, right? The dreams have to be thought about. It's not something you execute today. You're going to execute that short-term goal that 20 years from now is part of that dream, right? Mm-hmm. So all 5 of those categories need this broad vision. What do I want, and what does my financial world look like 40, 50 years from now? How many children do I have? What am I doing in my marriage, that's just going to make it phenomenal, and what does my family look like, and all these things, have 10,000 variables to them, but it's like a dream, right? You want to envision this glorious world that you can create. And if you do it right, you will create it, and you'll end up in the place called serenity.
Jerry, you've had a lot of impact on me in many different ways, but one of them has been health. And so, the question, if we're taking just one of these horizons, the health horizon, the question that someone should say to themselves, will my future self, will my 70 or 80-year-old or 60-year-old self thank me for the way I'm living today, health-wise?
Yeah, that's a great question. And again, that's exactly what I'm talking about, about questioning yourself about what do things look like, way down the road. I mean, at my age now, if someone told me 30 years ago I'd look like I look physically, and I can, perform like a 40-year-old in the gym and all these things, I mean, it was something I always saw, but didn't realize it could actually happen. So again, the reason people don't do it is because they don't think it's possible. But anything is possible over a long duration of time. And I think that health and wellness, I don't like putting numbers on things because they're all important. But if there is one thing that affects every other aspect, it's health and wellness. I mean, I don't care if you're worth $100 million. If you're sick, you're overweight, you can't get out of bed, what good is it, right? And as we get older, the financial part of it becomes less important anyways. It's all about the impact we have on other human beings and leadership skills with our family, and being an example, for what you can do to better the world. And by the way, the number one thing you can do to better the world is just put another quality human being into the world. And that means raising great children.
Yeah. Wow. I love it. Here's another little observation to make that's relevant to the timeline that we're talking about here. Most people spend the first half of their life chasing success, and the second half spend their life chasing peace. And I think that what we have to really say to people today is those two things are related. They're connected. They don't have to be enemies. Those are one and the same thing. Chasing success, chasing peace, serenity. Those are the same things, as long as we get our head on straight.
Yeah, exactly. Because all the success is again, what I said earlier, the residue. I mean, those are all the components that eventually will lead you to a great self-concept, confidence, peace of mind, contentment, all the things that all of us want to feel and when we get older, and knowing we did the best we could, and we did the best we could for other people.
Absolutely. I'm going to read. I want to read one more of your quotes because this hit me so hard, but it's
Sure.
so true. And because you brought up the comeback is always better than the setback, I'm going to read this again. I had to look it up real quick. So, I discovered that my previous experiences to hell and back made me unbreakable.
Right.
And the context of that story was you were talking about when your son called you to tell you he had cancer, and the fight that you put up, the fight and the subsequent win that you all have enjoyed. But in other words, instead of reducing you into a pile in a corner someplace, you were up for the fight, ready to go. And I think that's the big lesson people need to learn time and time and time again about failures. Failures are such an important part of our growth, and we're so afraid of them. We're so afraid of failure, but we shouldn't be. It really helps forge who we're going to be going forward.
Yeah. I mean, fear and lack of courage and being risk averse is essentially the definition of the sheep population, which makes up most people. You have to, and again, I can't tell you what makes people do this or don't do this, but I mean, if you're not willing to take a step into the unknown, your results in life are going to be very limited. I mean, I think there's a perception. I think there's a perception that super successful people, take that step knowing what they're doing. And nothing could be further from the truth. I don't care who you want to talk about. I don't care. You can bring up Jeff Bezos, Elon Musk. Every one of those guys took leaps, took risk of just unbelievable proportions, tried things that were just impossible. And when they go wrong, it's just another way to figure out how to do it right.
That's right.
And that is when you get in that mode. The first few are going to hurt, by the way. I'm just letting you know. The first big failures you have are going to hurt. And you cannot become victim to that. You got to just keep doing it, because I always say, like when it comes to business, people always, bring up, oh, how did you start your first business? I say, well, all you hear about are my successful businesses. What about the ones that didn't work? There's lots of those, right? And that's because you can fail as many times as it takes. You only need to be successful once. Yeah. Because once that happens to you, you know how to do it. You could duplicate it. And, and I've had major setbacks over the years, but I knew I learned in my 20s how to make money, right? So, once I learned how to make money, it kind of, every time I lost money, I might have, sat in the corner and cried for a month. But after that, it came back, okay, well, I've done this before. I know how to do it. Let's just do it again. Right. So, Yeah.
And you know what? I mean, we could go all the way back to the very beginning of our podcast. I mean, that is the lesson I want people to know, is that once you learn how to do this, once you learn how to be successful, doesn't matter how many times you get knocked down, you do it again. You do it again.
Yeah.
So it's funny you mentioned your businesses that no one's ever heard of. Jerry, this past week, I had the occasion to count up my businesses. Now, let me just tell you, from the very start through right now, because right now I have 3 new, I'm going to call them projects on my desk, but they're going to be business. 12. I've had 12 businesses. Now, you and I probably only know about 3 or 4 of them, okay? But I mean, I've had one that was amazing right up to the part of start, and then I killed it, So, I mean, I've had some that had failure to launch, but 12 times I've had these pretty major initiatives that have gone forward, and I'm so excited about them, I can hardly stand it. I mean, I love it. I don't know if it's the right time. I don't know if it's the right time to tell my story or not, Jerry. Matter of fact, let's get back to Serenity. Let's get back to Serenity. Okay. So, again, I say you saved the best to last by writing Serenity as your final chapter. But how do you see all the other chapters in Run with the Cheetahs? How do they all play and combine and add up to the chapter on Serenity? How does it all work together?
It's a very broad concept, Serenity. And, life is a complex mix of experiences over time. And all the chapters cover that duration of experiences over time. I talk about from your childhood to your first, to when you get launched with something, and the setbacks and the failures and how you handle them all and all the different chapters. But, getting back to the risk thing, the chapters, I think, explain clearly the more risk you take, the more experiences of learning you're going to gain. And without the phases and seasons of what life brings you, both good and bad, for me personally, I would have never been able to reach the extraordinary life I have today. And although all the chapters are important, I believe the two chapters related to this Serenity thing that people really need to dig into are dream stealers, people who escape. That's part of the dream stealers chapter, and embrace the battle. If you get a clear understanding of the concepts in those two chapters, it's going to be a lot easier for you to get that vision and faith to plan for the serenity later in life.
Jerry, all these chapters are good. I have to remind you.
Yeah.
I have to remind you when we were doing the audiobook, you did the audiobook, and then we did a little bonus content. Every time we would do a chapter, I would say, "Oh, that's my favorite chapter." I love that because every one of these chapters are so good. I mean, it's got such good stuff in it. Let's talk about you and your personal legacy. I mean,
Right.
I know, listen, I know your kids. I know a couple of them more than the other ones, but what role does Serenity play in the life you hope you've lived?
Well, again, it's an evolving situation, and I'm at a point now where I can feel it, I can see it, but it doesn't mean that all of a sudden, you stop everything you're doing. I mean, you continue to evolve and continue to make those things grow. But like I said before, serenity is not a individual achievement or an individual goal. It's the residue of a lifetime's goals and achievements. Okay. And all that's happened in my life is I've done enough positive things to where I've developed that inner sense of peace. And I want to be careful how I say this because, I know that this is the way people feel when they have the feeling of serenity, and it almost can sound like you're conceited or something. But part of it is that you evolve to know you're right. Okay. Now, I don't know if you understand what that means, but you have a feeling of looking at the world, looking at society, looking at people, and I know who I want to be around. I know who I want to have relationships with, and I know exactly what to avoid as well. I mean, through my experiences, I can sniff out a snake a mile away now, and I had a lot of exposure to snakes over the years. So,
Sure.
that's part of it. It's an intangible, that forms in your inner self from your thoughts and actions over decades of time. And time has reinforced my belief in the concept of serenity. And watching my father's life, but my mother as well, reinforces it. And how much better can it get? I couldn't answer that question, but I can guarantee you this: I'm going to continue to do the extraordinary things in my life to enhance my inner peace and contentment all the time. And at the very, very top of the list, and again, this is another thing I've learned from talking to a lot of elderly people and watching them. That spouse of yours is the number one key component to that serenity in your life.
Wow.
I mean, there's no relationship, even your kids are not up at the level of how that relationship of building that empire with your spouse and doing that over, decades and decades of time. For me personally, I could not imagine. I literally, it's like so far away from me living a life of regret and acting like part of the sheep population. It's just not in the cards, and
Well,
that comes from the work. Comes
well,
from the work. Yep.
and you are in the minority, my friend. You are in the minority. I know,
Well,
and I know we're
but
trying to help.
that's why we're doing this podcast,
Yeah.
because people have to get out of that comfort zone and do like we say all the time, just do it anyways, because it's hard.
Yeah.
Don't let anybody tell. Don't let. I don't know anybody that's ever gotten to a level of serenity and can say, "Oh man, that was an easy life. That went great. Everything was perfect." It just doesn't work that way.
Yeah. So I'll tell you what I'm going to say. I'm going to say this after hearing all of that. Maybe serenity isn't something that we find at the end of life. Maybe we need to think about serenity as something we're building today. I mean, every healthy meal, every difficult conversation we're having with either a family member or a friend, every dollar we save or invest wisely, every act of integrity, every prayer, and every forgiveness. These are the things that contribute and build with compound interest to that life of serenity down the road. So we should start today. We can literally start today building that life of the future.
Yeah, I mean there's absolutely no doubt about that. And we're gonna. I think we discussed making this kind of a two-part podcast. We're going to tie in serenity with regret, and we're going to get into the next podcast discussing the other path of regret, which unfortunately that's where the majority of people land. So our goal is to get more people on the serenity path and get them off that regret path.
And that was going to be my next question was, okay, we have talked about serenity and the advantages of serenity and the wonderfulness of serenity. What keeps people from serenity? What's the obstacle to serenity? Now, you just said it, but what is the obstacle?
Part of it is, and we've said this about every topic we've discussed, is just awareness, knowledge, and you hear all the gurus say, oh, everything is about action. Well, you can't take the action until you have some education, right? So there is a value to learning about a subject and studying it so that you can get launched hopefully in the right direction. Now, it doesn't mean that, you're not going to get off track and have to recalculate and everything else. But I think the number one reason people don't go down this path is the way society has us conform. We comply. Again, most people who living a life of serenity, I call them rule breakers. I mean, they don't follow the same path.
Yeah.
They do things differently, and they're efficient. That's another characteristic of people that get to this level. It's also the way our human brains are about wanting to have everything now, right?
Yeah.
And again, it's another characteristic, that faith factor of doing enough of the right things enough of the time over a long enough period of time is going to yield tremendous results for you in your life. So that's another thing that holds people back. They just can't see it. I mean, they just don't understand that. I mean, I personally know, just to give you an idea, I personally know several people, not just one or two, several people that are my age or older, had great careers, made a bunch of money, and they're broke. And now, again, I'm not saying that money is the all in all to serenity, but if you're 65, 70 years old and you don't have the means to take care of yourself, you become a burden to somebody else. And that's another big goal of mine. I never want to be a burden to my children or to anybody else, or inflict my pain upon somebody else's situation in their life. So, it's having that vision, having the discipline to execute the long-term visions and actions that lead to serenity, while at the same time being obsessed with the short-term goals and executing to meet the immediate needs. But the more immediate needs, when I say immediate, this year, next year, whatever, the more you're building in those windows, the serenity part is just slowly creeping up. You go climbing that ladder, to where you put another notch in it. Oh, one more thing on the way to serenity. One more thing on the way to serenity, and that's family. Everything we said: faith, health, and wellness. Every time, like people that go to the gym, that have been doing it for 20, 30 years, go ask them. Why do you go to the gym? Nobody wants to go to the gym. I'm just telling you, right? Okay, I've been doing this forever. My wife and I were just talking about this morning. We went to the gym at 6:00 this morning, where I'm on the way to the gym, and I just didn't feel that great today, And we were talking about. I said, yeah, but the rest of the day is going to be great because I followed through on my commitment to myself, right? And the more you commit, and the more you follow through, and the more you get done, and the more you build, the more you're on that path to serenity. And just one last thing, I know I'm going on and on here, but one last thing about this: accountability. The more accountability you can take on and responsibility in life, the quicker that path is. That's another subject to make sure you address.
Well, I really liked the very first part of that answer, because as I kind of jumped in and said, my answer to what is the obstacle is regret. We don't want to get to 60s and 70s and have regrets. But you actually said awareness and education, which, yes, those are things we talk about all the time because they are core to just about every bit of human growth we can have: awareness and education. So we're going to do a two-part on this, because part one was serenity and part two was on regret. I want to give you just a little tease on regret, if I could.
Sure.
We've talked about regrets in some of our earlier podcasts, and we articulated a whole list of what are the top things people regret. There has been a lot of somewhat recent research, and in the newest research, and I'm actually quoting from Daniel Pink here, who has done an exhaustive study. In addition to all the normal things that you break down, he has two categories. And I'm going to mention these two categories right now as a tease, and we'll talk about them next time we get together. But the first one is people regret loss of connection. They've lost their connection with whether it's friends or, in some cases, family members. Those relationships have not gone well. And some of the most joyous reunions, stories he tells, are when someone has reconnected with maybe an old college friend or a friend from high school. I know I've got, coming up in August, I've got what we're calling a cousin reunion coming up. Right. Now, this is crazy. All of us cousins, and I've got about 6 or 7, have all lived in the DC metro area most of our lives. But you know what? That river we call the Great Potomac Ocean has separated the Maryland people from the Virginia people, okay? And I haven't seen my Maryland cousins since, a funeral, 10 or 12 years ago, and that certainly wasn't an opportunity to reconnect very well. So we're actually getting together in early August. All of us are getting together, and so this loss of connection, we're trying to restore this a little bit. So loss of connection. And then number 2, and boy, this is one, we're going to talk a lot about this, Jerry, and that is people who didn't live their own lives.
Yep.
People who feel like they did not live out their true life.
Yep.
And boy, is that sad. That is so sad.
Yep.
My goodness. Well, okay, there we go. So, we've had a big day on Serenity, and let me again offer my condolences to you and your family for the loss of your father. A wonderful man, a great man, truly a great man. I love that guy.
Yep. Thank you.
So sorry. And I hope your mother's doing well. I hope your mother's doing okay.
Yeah, she's hanging in there.
So we've talked about serenity, and we've talked about, what's coming up in part 2 of this is we're going to really delve into regret. living with, dealing with, and overcoming regret, because regret is something that we can use as like a warning light or on our dashboard. It's an indicator of some things that we can address today. We don't have to wait till we're 60, 70, and 80 to address regret. So, Jerry, you got any final words for us today?
Sure. Let me just wrap it up with this. You have millions of choices to make, and those choices are made every single day. I mean, it's just a constant decision of, which path we're going, what angle we're taking, and, you need to ask yourself, am I moving in the direction of a life filled with self-pity, guilt, hopelessness, despair, all leading to that life of regret that you just mentioned? Or am I making choices that will lead me to true joy, honor, contentment, and peace of mind, resulting in serenity? So, as you age and you get toward that final chapter, up in your years, and as that approaches, the thing that I want to end this with is I'm going to tell you nobody is coming to the rescue. So take accountability and make all those choices wisely, starting today.
Well, Jerry, I'm going to have to tell our editor that needs to be both the opening and the closing. I mean, those are powerful words right there, my friend. That's good stuff.
Yeah.
Jerry, I want to thank you for your time today. I want to thank our listeners, and please, friends, know how much it means to us that you watch and that you talk to us through your comments. We appreciate, and we try and answer every single one. I'd love to hear from some people in their 20s, 30s, and 40s about how they feel about a conversation about serenity. Is it too early for you, or does it make sense that you start building your serenity today? Love to hear from you. Jerry, next time, buddy, we're talking about overcoming those regrets. You good with that?
Absolutely. Look forward to it.
Have a good one. I'll see you soon.
All right. See ya.
Goodbye.